What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I'm going to bring you a different type of video. So massive shout out to Terry who kind of gave me this idea, and I thought it'd be good to give you a deep dive deck breakdown for some of the new decks in Phantom Revenge. Now Phantom Revenge is due to hit the UK and European shores, unfortunately, as of technically at your OTS stores Wednesday, the 3rd, and then kind of everywhere else in all the local places where you can pick up packs on the 4th of December as well, which means they will be in active play from that day on. So what I'm going to be starting off with is I'm going to be starting off with the Enneacraft. Now this is probably the cheapest archetype to put together from Phantom Revenge. The current cores have go from anywhere from £60 up to £70, and that could increase over time. But the reason for that one is it only contains one ultra rare, being one of your main boss monsters in the Enneacraft Marie. Now I'll talk about these a little bit more in depth a little bit later on, because the deck itself consists of 11 cards, being 4 of your boss monsters, 4 of your overall starters, and then 3 spell cards. And I'm going to go into depth of each single one of those, talk about the playstyle of the deck, what it wants to try and achieve, what is it trying to do, and how you can kind of combat it, and then some other supporting cards you might want to look into to help you increase the deck if you are trying to put it together. So if you like this type of video, then please make sure you show it appreciation by giving it a good old thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't done already, and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss out on any upcoming video. So let's start off with the starters. So there are 4 main starters for the deck, not including the spell cards, which could technically lead you into your starters as well, but I'll talk about them a little bit later on. So of the 4 starters, you have Tefettiro, Etko, Proton, and of course Inato. Now each of these are your level 1 monsters, all of them are earth attributes, and as you'll see for a pendulum based archetype, all of the scales including your boss monsters are 0, as the whole design of the deck is not to pendulum summon. It's crazy, but they actually have a really unique ability to reveal cards in the hand to then special summon any monster from your hand in face down defense position. So what makes the starters so important? Well, their effects in the scale is what's going to make them different from your boss monsters, in the pure sense that all of them share the exact same effect, that each time a monster is flipped face up, you place an EC counter on this card, which comes relevant a little bit later on when you take into account the field spell for the archetype, because this will provide you with some burn damage during the end phase of the turn. The other effects that they all share is you get to pay 900 life points to reveal 3 Enneacraft cards from the deck. So that can be your boss monsters, that could be another starter, or it could be one of your spells, or even a future support card that we may get in the form of a trap card. You never know. You get to randomly, opponent will pick one for you to add to the hand, and you shuffle the rest back into the deck. Now this is only be activated once per turn, which is quite important to consider, because the rest of the effects, the actual monster effects of your Enneacrafts, are not once per turn, which is absolutely insane, and that's something you're going to need to be aware of. So as we look into each individual effects, I'll talk about their shared effect in general first, and then I'll talk about each individual one and what type of effect they do provide. So the additional shared effect on its monsters line of text is you get to reveal this card in hand to special summon a monster from the hand in face down defense position. You cannot special summon the entire turn you activate this effect except face down defense position. So it does kind of give you that benefit of not being like splashable, like it is a deck onto itself. It wants to utilize some generic cards that don't rely on, like you couldn't really use K9s. I mean, technically you could, because you'd summon during your opponent's turn, but like you'd only be using Azuna and Lupus as like a hand interaction type-esque. The unique abilities are as follows. So for your Tefettiro, its flip effect is you banish face up a random card from your opponent's hand until the end phase. When your opponent activates a card or effect that includes an effect to add a card from their deck to the hand, you get to change this card from face down defense position to face up, and then add an Enneacraft card from the deck to the hand. The Proto, it flips, destroys one monster your opponent controls, and when your opponent activates a monster effect in the hand, you get a quick effect to change it from face down to face up, to then add an Enneacraft card from the deck to the hand. The Etko, negate the effect of one effect monster your opponent controls, which is the flip effect, until the end of this turn. When your opponent activates a card or effect that includes an effect that special summons a monster, quick effect, change it from face down to face up, and then add an Enneacraft card from the deck to the hand. And then finally, the Inato. So its flip effect is shuffle up to 3 cards from your opponent's graveyard and or banishment back into the deck. And when your opponent activates a card or effect in the graveyard or banishment, you get a quick effect to change it from face down to face up, and then add an Enneacraft card from the deck to the hand. So you can kind of see how these are your direct searches of the entire deck. This is what's going to increase your consistency. In regards to combating these direct cards, Droll and Lockbird does seem to be a very, very powerful option here. And another thing with all of these cards in general being able to reveal themselves in the hand to then special summon any monster from the hand, you're not going to worry about Mulchummy Fulos or Meows, but you might want to consider a Mulchummy Perulia as a good counter option to this card, because Perulia just needs your opponent to normal summon or special summon from the hand, which is exactly what these cards are going to be doing. So let's look at the counterparts. Let's look at the stronger options for these decks. These are your boss monsters, the one that is going to allow you to do some damage, as all of your lower monsters are 100 attack and 1000 defense. So when we are looking at our stronger boss monsters for the Enneacraft strategy, you'll see that we have one ultra rare, two super rares, and one rare. Each of them, again, share the same ability in the scales, and that is as follows. That each time a monster is flipped face up, you place an EC counter on this card. At the end of the battle phase, if you have an Enneacraft card in your other pendulum zone, you get to target a monster your opponent controls with an attack less than this card and destroy it. Now, all of your big monster stats are going to be 3000 attack and 2500 defense. They also share the exact same ability as your lower level monsters, that you get to reveal them in the hand to then special summon any monster from your hand in face down defense vision, including themselves, which is the exact same for the little guys, but that's just something to remember, that you want to try and reveal your little guys and then summon down your big guys in face down defense vision, because that's kind of going to be the unknowns. You don't want to really summon down the cards your opponent is expecting to be summoned down or that you've already revealed, because then you're kind of taking the surprise out of the factor. So let's look at our boss monsters. So we have Enneacraft Atori Ma, we have Arachna Tail, Azia Leon, and Astra Pixia. So let's go for the ultra rare, starting off with the Ma. So Ma's flip effect, it changes all your opponent's monsters to face down defense vision, and the monsters that were changed cannot change their battle position. So quite like Quaking Mirror Force, it means that when they are face down, they are stuck face down. Then on top of that is during your opponent's turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect on the field, you get a quick effect to change this card from face down to face up defense vision, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Then if we look at the Arachna Tail, this is going to be one of your more defensive options against field breakers. So after this card was flipped face up, while it is in the monster zone, each time a monster is sent to your opponent's graveyard, they take 900 damage. When your opponent activates a card or effect that would destroy a card or cards on the field, quick effect, change this card from face down defense vision to face up defense vision. And then monsters and Enneacraft spells you control cannot be destroyed by card effect for the rest of the turn, which is actually really important because it gives you that reaction if your opponent does want to activate something like a Lightning Storm or a Raigeki. Then as we move on to the Leon, after it was flipped face up, while it is in the monster zone, each time your opponent adds a card to their hand, by card effect, they take 900 damage for each card. When your opponent activates a card or effect in response to your card or effect activation, quick effect, change this card from face down defense vision to face up defense vision, then non-target, return up to 3 cards on the field back to the hand. The benefit of something like this is if you were to get this card to the field first and then your opponent tries to chain Perulia, that's when you might be able to get some sort of interaction from your opponent. I highly doubt that they're going to be holding it back that turn if they know you're playing Enneacraft, but it could be one of the ones that really does catch your opponent off guard. It does give you a little bit more interaction during your turn as well, that should they try to interact with one of your little guys in the spell and trap zone or your pendulum scales to search, that will give you the ability to flip your Leon face up. Moving on to the last one being the Astra Pixia. So after this card was flipped face up, while it is in the monster zone, your opponent cannot target cards on the field or graveyard with card effects. Now this is really important, that it's cards in general, not just your cards or not just your opponent's cards. It means that if they want to try and target their own cards, they're not going to be able to. And then when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a card or cards you control with a card effect, while your opponent activates it, you get to turn this card from face down defense to face up defense to negate that effect. Then you get to banish face down a random card from your opponent's hand. So if you were to combo this back off with your Defectro, this will then give you the ability to kind of take away 2 cards from your opponent's hands. Now let's take a look at the all-important spell cards that tie this all together. So when we're looking at the spell cards, there were 3 spell cards that the deck got. One of them being a field spell in the form of the Enneacraft, which is always treated as an Enneacraft card, and then 2 normal spell cards in the form of the Enneacraft Release and the Enneacraft Reverse. So let's have a look at the Enneacraft, as this in my opinion is probably one of the more important spell cards for the entire strategy, as it does give you the ability to recycle cards from the field back to the hand and also burn your opponent. So once per turn, during the end phase, remove all EC counters from your field, and it is mandatory. And if you do, your opponent takes 900 damage for each. Now remember, if you have 2 Enneacraft pendulum scales set up, one there, and one there. Every time a monster is flipped face up, they will gain an EC counter, meaning that each individual one will be at 900 damage. So if you have 2 of that, you're going to multiply it to 1800. So every time you flip a monster face up with 2 pendulum scales set in place, that's going to be 1800 damage during the end phase if your opponent lets these stay on the field. So how do you counter it? Well, you don't let them stay on the field. Cosmic Cyclone can actually be very, very important, as it's one of the cards that they can't really protect against unless they go for the Pixia. And even then, if you have ways to banish your opponent's spells and traps without targeting, evenly matched, it can be very, very damaging. But that's not all for the Enneacraft. On top of that, you only get to use the following effects once per turn. Target any number of Enneacraft Pendulum monster cards you control, return them to the hand. If an Enneacraft Pendulum monster or monsters you control is flipped face up during the main phase, you choose one of them and either return it to the hand or place it into your Pendulum zone. So again, it's ways to recycle your Enneacraft if you want to utilize them again during your opponent's turn, because you kind of want to be able to special summon them from the hand to face down defense vision. And the only reason you'd want to keep them on the field is if it's one of your bigger boss monsters and you're planning to shift it to attack and then swing for game the next turn. Moving on to the Enneacraft release. Now this is the consistency card of the deck. Now the reason this is considered as the consistency card of the deck is it lets you place an Enneacraft Pendulum monster from the deck into your Pendulum zone. If this card is in the grave, except the turn it was sent there, you get to banish it and then add 1 face up Enneacraft monster from your extra deck back to the hand. So it's actually going to be very, very important should your opponent destroy some of your little monsters, or if they just destroy some of your scales and send them to the extra deck, this is a way for you to get them back out because you're not going to be Pendulum summoning in this deck, as I've already mentioned, with the scales being 0 and 0. Moving on to the final Enneacraft card, Enneacraft Reverse. So this card lets you shuffle any number of Enneacraft monsters from the hand and or face up field into the deck or extra deck to then draw cards equal to the number shuffled. If your opponent normal or special summons a monster while this card is in the graveyard, except during the damage step, you get to banish this card to then activate one of these effects. You special summon an Enneacraft monster from the hand in face down defense position, or you change a face down defense position Enneacraft monster you control to face up defense position. Now this is actually really, really important because this gives you the ability to utilize your flip effects of stuff like your Enneacraft Ma during your opponent's turn, because remember, it only wants to flip itself up during your turn, so you need a way to flip it up during your opponent's turn to give you the most form of interaction, and then technically flip your opponent's monsters face down and lock them into position. Now the final segment I'm going to go over in this particular deck is some of the other support cards you can utilize and that might be a little bit more common for the deck to use if you are going to be either playing this deck or possibly facing this deck. Now there are a lot of different generic options that you might want to consider that could be something to look into, but I'm going to talk about cards that specifically lend themselves to the strategy of the deck and what the deck doesn't use or doesn't need to worry about. So let's start off with the Destructive Daruma Cannon. The benefit of being able to utilize a card like the Destructive Daruma Cannon is it lets you change as many monsters on the field as possible, including your own, to face down defense position. So it lets you reset your own monsters as well as locking your opponent's monsters to face down. If you're up against a link-based strategy, not only will it give you the ability of putting all of their monsters face down so they can't be used as link materials, but if they do have any link monsters on the field, that monster is going to be sent to the graveyard. Then we're going to look at 3 cards that don't rely on the extra deck. So when you have such a flexible extra deck in the form of the Enneacraft, where they don't really want to special summon from the extra deck and really don't need to use anything from the extra deck, yes, of course, you could make an extra deck style version of the deck, which can be quite useful for you, but you can utilize cards like Pot of Extravagance. Banish 3 or 6 from your extra deck, draw 2 cards. What's not to like about that one? Then we do look at 2 branded style cards in the form of the Fallen and the Virtuous and Dogmatica Punishment. Now, utilized for the Fallen and the Virtuous, this is more of a field breaker approach for the deck, but you do have the option, if you wanted to play something like an Ultimate Slayer or anything else like a Raigeki. Considerably a super polymerization, but that can only be used during your opponent's turn. The benefit of something like the Fallen and the Virtuous is it gives you recyclability, or the ability to get another copy of itself from the deck for the next turn. So this one is going to give you the main ability of being able to send a monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz from your extra deck to the grave, target a face-up card on the field and destroy it. So this will give you the option to send an Albion from the extra deck, which gives you the ability during the end phase to set another copy of the Fallen and the Virtuous, or you could send a Titaniclad, which could lead you into options like an Ecclesia, but you're only going to want to make sure you do that during your opponent's turn, as remember, the biggest clause on the Enneacraft is it does not let you special summon the entire turn when you use the effects to reveal in the hand. except in face down defense position, and you can't really do that with the Ecclesia. You'd just be adding it. So it's just better, more beneficial that if you open up a Fallen and the Virtuous to activate it during your opponent's turn, send in the Titaniclad, and then being able to get your Ecclesia, because then your Ecclesia could search you out your Fallen and the Virtuous, or the next card that I'm going to mention, your Dogmatica Punishment. So when you have so much flexibility in the extra deck, being able to utilize a card like Dogmatica Punishment when you don't really plan to summon from the extra deck can be really, really important, as that will give you the ability to sometimes not destroy just one card, but can also let you destroy two, because you'll be able to destroy one monster with your Dogmatica Punishment, and then depending on what you send from the extra deck will either give you the ability, using an Igmata Pack Bit, to put a card from the monster zone into the spell and trap zone, or you can send an Elder Entity Ints and destroy another card on the field. Or if you just want a bit of draw power, you can actually decide to send a Garura and then give yourself a nice little bit of a draw. There are some other options you might want to consider, and one that is quite unique to the strategy of the Enneacraft is being able to play the Tribal Games Arms Mouser. And the reason you would do this is if it is sent to the graveyard, you get to target one card on the field and then put it to face down defense position. So whether you want to disrupt your opponent's monsters or whether you just want to reset one of your monsters, it can actually be very, very helpful for you. So that's pretty much it for the entire Enneacraft video breakdown. Hopefully this has given you a bit more of an insight into what the deck wants to try and do. I will be bringing you my own personal profile for this as well, and massive shout out to Shane who has helped me put the build together. And then I'll also do a test stand video as well, so you can kind of see how the deck wants to operate and how it wants to function in comparison to some of the others. Now, if you do like this video, as I mentioned at the start, make sure you give it a good old thumbs up, hit that like button, smash the subscribe button, and hit on the notification bell so you do not miss out on any more upcoming. If this video gets above 50 likes, I will then proceed to do the exact same thing for Heka Hands, and then, of course, for the Cool Tunes. And then maybe if it is appreciated enough, I will do that for all future sets as well, to give you a bit more of a breakdown of new decks entering the current format, whether it be at the top end of the competitive level, or whether it be at the lower end rogue options that you need to keep an eye out on if you're going to events in the coming weeks. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share, the whole 9 yards. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.